Canine Detection Collaborative, a detection dog training trio with Stacy Barnett.
Hi.
Robin Grubel.
Hey there.
And Crystal Wing.
What's up?
With humor and a big dose of theory, our trio talks practical training advice and features interviews with top trainers and scientists.
It's Canine Detection Collaborative.
Hi guys, this is Stacy Barnett with Canine Detection Collaborative, and I am here with my two co-hosts, Crystal Wing.
Hello.
And Robin Grubel.
Hello.
And we are here in it's the final installment for the Jo-Rosie interview. And hopefully you guys have been listening to the first three that we've had. And if you haven't, make sure you go back and listen to them. There's a whole lot of really, really great information. And then, of course, we always do our reflection. So we're going to kind of do a little bit like that for the last episode. We're going to be talking a lot about different types of training techniques, philosophies, etc. Then kind of wrap up the whole series that we've been doing with Jo-Rosie. So stay tuned.
So something that you've mentioned, positive reinforcement style training. I guess I'm just kind of curious, do you see some myths happening there?
Yes.
Because
that was really quick.
Because when it comes to this, I'm thinking, I've been told a lot that, well, you can't do that all positively. And it means that you are behind the scenes doing something differently than what you're showing to the public. And I just go, okay, believe what you want. Everybody can just do their thing and train. It really doesn't bother me. Because I know like Quinn was one of the very first, he's got to be one of the very first IPO3 in the United States that didn't have. And then you go to all okay, where do you fit in the whatevers? But I would say is probably positively done as you can consider. And some would say that it's not the easiest way to train, and it's the only way that I've ever known. So I guess I kind of go to 2 points here. Why would you choose this as your way of doing it that makes you consider that, I have to stick true to this way of training? And then also kind of along the myth line, because there's so many times, like now that I'm getting into the bird dog stuff, we just trained with a guy and he's, an old guy that he's a good old boy and he does his things. And I learned so much from him. And we were both smart asses back and forth. We gave each other a hard time. It was great fun. And he's one of those guys like, come on back again, so and learned a ton from him, but I would definitely not train the way he does. But I learned so much of the criteria and the things and the way that I want to take what he's doing, but just teach it differently. So what is your why, and then the myths?
Goodness. Okay. So the why. To start with, the why
was a lot.
To start with, when I first started out as a naive dog trainer, the why was really simple in that when I was studying and then afterwards as a trainer called Chirag Patel. Do you know Chirag Patel?
Yeah. Chirag's amazing.
So me and Chirag used to sit next to each other in an office for a year and a half. We did, working for the same company. In fact, we trained a whole bunch of chickens for Britain's Got Talent. But anyway, we sat together, and so and that was fairly early on. And my first mentor was a guy called Ryan, who I'm still who's still one of my very best friends, and Claire, who's still a very good friend of mine. They were all force-free. So it was how I was brought into the world. If you like, I was conceived by force-free parents. And so it's how I learned everything. Punishment was a bit of a dirty word when I was studying. And like I was definitely, when I first started, I was definitely of that kind of like newly vegan evangelicist mentality where I was like, these disgusting, horrible, torturous things. Why would you even look at them? Most definitely when I first started. And so I built my skill set through free shaping and luring and capturing. And I learned how to do that very professionally and found that I had a bit of a talent for doing it and really enjoyed doing it. And when it came to modifying behavior and teaching puppy classes, which is all I did really for the first, at least 5 years of my career, was, assessing dogs. There was never a question because I could do everything I needed to do quickly, smartly, proficiently, and without anybody ever questioning my ethics, because it was easy. And I still would 100% believe that there's a pyramid of learning that should be taking place. And even if you are someone who goes on to be an incredible and beautifully elegant trainer using chameleon e-collar, I still think that to be the very best trainer you possibly can, everybody should start with positive methods. Everybody should start not using aversives. I think that the best trainers I've ever seen in terms of the output of what they're training. So let's put ethics aside for 1 second. And if we literally just look at how effective a method is and how beautiful the behavior you're getting out of the dog is, I think the most elegant trainers I've ever seen are trainers who have managed to really, really become incredibly skillful at positive, in inverted commas, training, motivational training with toys and food. And then they've layered aversives on top of that. And I think some of the least skillful, shittest training I've ever seen is people who have learned e-collar first or prong collar first and have never then, or have tried to kind of plaster together the motivational methods and layer them on top as I'm going to compel the dog to do it with a prong collar, and then I'm going to feed him a treat for when he does it right. That style of balance training in that order is probably the worst training I've seen, or some of the worst training I've seen, in terms of how effective the impact on the behavior that comes out the other end.
So here's where we're going to pause the Jo-Rosie interview. And again, I wasn't actually interviewing her, but I was listening, and it was a really, really great conversation. So let's go ahead and do a little reflection on what we just heard. What do you guys think?
I think I laugh at myself that I was stuttering, trying to figure out how to describe my training. Why is it so hard to be able to put words to how I train or how I think about training without all of a sudden going, oh, I might make someone mad, or I might, cause this problem, or why do I feel like it's so controversial to say that I don't use a pinch or a prong, and why isn't there a name for that? And does there need to be a name for that? And what are the labels? And blah.
Yeah. The whole bucket thing kind of.
It's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think that we get so wrapped up in what labels of trainers when everybody sort of has the whole conversation of what you should be doing is training the dog in front of you.
Right.
And we get wrapped up into those labels because, and we've talked about method trainers in here, and people who pre-select for dogs, especially in the working dog world. You have that a lot because they're trying to get dogs out the door. So they pre-select for certain dogs because it fits their training method and their training philosophy.
Yep.
It's fine. It's a way to train.
Yep.
And then there's this stigma attached to certain types of tools, and no matter where you are on the fabulous thing that Crystal came to call the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And the honest answer is it depends on what I'm dealing with, on where I fall.
Right.
And so we really need to kind of get over this whole, oh my gosh, I'm a balance trainer. Oh my gosh, I'm purely positive. Because I'll tell you the thing that I have learned, depending on the dog, depending on the day, really good example, Bristol, who is my tug puppy, who wants to play tug, and it's rough and tumble tug, all sorts of things. We're doing detection work. I'm playing with her, and I reach out to do the normal, I'm going to pat you on the side, and she cringed.
Oh, yeah.
She obviously found that our typical normal play.
That was aversive to her.
As punishing.
Yeah.
It was aversive to her. So guess what? That was punishing.
Yeah.
And let's just say I found out she had a hole in her. She's now on antibiotics, and she whacked me with the toy today. So we're all even. And I'm going to have it pretty bruised. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
So we're even. But, and some dogs take different things. Some people take different training methodology, all sorts of things.
I mean, with some dogs, you just breathe out the wrong way.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I've learned that over the years, especially as an instructor, I'm not going to change anybody's core training philosophies in a 3-day seminar.
No,
Okay.
I have no expectation of that. Nope.
Right. I can give you some tools, some different tools.
Eat the meat, spit out the bones. That was one of the favorite things that comes out of the seminars.
Yes. And maybe some different ways to think about things. And as long as you're fair to your learner, as I'm going to steal some of Crystal's terminology, which is the dog, rock on.
Yeah. I think it is about fairness. That's always kind of been mine because I'm not a bucket person. Like I don't really kind of put myself in a bucket, and I don't try to judge other people in a bucket. I know how I train my dogs. I know I stay fair to them. That's my biggest intention. I know I'm kind to them and I take care of their emotions. But we set boundaries and we kind of work within that. And that's kind of what I do. And it's just, and it's so dog dependent. I mean, I've got little Y who, is this little soft, timid dog. And then I've got, a dog like Powder. So actually she's kind of sensitive too, but you know what I mean? Very, very different dogs.
Well, and they're all different.
Yeah.
And so you train differently for that dog.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I'll have discussions with my friends that are more positive, because I don't know how else to say it, where they don't want to use any sort of like no. They won't use words to let the dog know that they're incorrect. And more power to you, but I don't know how to do that. And I don't really want to do that with my dog because I feel like it's taking away another tool of communication. And so I think that's where we all are speaking the same language. We're all doing similar things. But I think what's important to me was when she was saying that we should start off positive. And I think that's where I will stand behind that. So there are certain things.
Agreed.
I totally will say, you train how you train, you do you, boo.
Yeah.
But I really firmly believe that you should be able to understand if you're Lima, if you're positive only, which that really doesn't exist. So I can get nailed to the stake for that one, but can't happen. Sorry. Force free tends to be the title that most people are using currently. Again, it doesn't really fit. I think Pat Stewart has a post from July 22nd where he talks about a dog training spectrum. And it was right after I had posted one that we're going to share a little bit here in a minute. And it's interesting how they all kind of tie into each other. So I combine what Jo-Rosie said from our interview, and then I combined some more ideas from him, and I added sprinkles because sprinkles are important. Yes. I don't think I'll say what I called the sprinkles, but it kind of went along Jo-Rosie's ideas.
Oh, it's already explicit. You're probably okay.
Yeah. So it was interesting that kind of all at the same time in early July and late July, we were kind of having these conversations all kind of across the world, because Pat Stewart is Canine Paradigm in Australia, and Jo-Rosie's over in Spain, and here we are in Iowa at the time. So it's fascinating that this is a topic that will keep coming up, and it ebbs and flows. But I do think there is something to be said for helping people understand that we don't necessarily need a label, because it does change throughout each dog and throughout our career as dog trainers. There's something to be said about the people that we end up training around and the people that we are hanging out with. And when she said that she worked in the same office building as Chirag Patel, are you kidding me?
I believe it was the same office.
How is that possible?
I don't know. It's interesting how I think we've talked, serendipity puts you in a lot of places. And one of my favorite quotes is, opportunity is missed by most because it shows up in overalls and looks like work. Thank you, Thomas Edison. I believe that was him. And it also reminds me of my dad. But I look at, I happened to take a chicken workshop from Parfine Farhudi and Bob Bailey. And it started this whole interesting discussion with Parveen. And she spent 4.5 months at my house. And we talked behavior every day. After she left, I was really exhausted.
It's easy to spend 4.5 months at your farm. I think it's this vortex. It's like this time vortex that goes,
It is.
thou shalt not leave. It's just like it sucks you in. And you end up camping with your little red trailer in the driveway and have a pigeon try to fly into your, anyway.
Or a little white murder van.
Yes.
Exactly.
And it's interesting though, because you run into those people, and it's even been interesting for me here at the farm to have, the canine census home for wayward dog trainers. And and then have a student spend 2 weeks, and other students who are like, well, we'll come down and we'll do a private training, and then we're going to stay for a seminar. And are you sure we have to go home? And it's so interesting to think about all of those people that you end up sitting next to in an office that you didn't realize, like Jo-Rosie did, that Chirag Patel is going, later in life. That's a thing.
Yeah.
And there's all these quotes out there, the type of energy that you put out is the type of energy that you attract.
I think it's being open to opportunity too. I'm just kind of thinking about how I met Denise. It was like just I stumbled upon, her, it was at the very beginning of Fenzi Dog Sports Academy, and I've been that was like term number 2 back in 2013. And, sometimes you just make connections, and it's
there you go.
amazing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I do think it's interesting how trainers and artists and just in general, when you have similar interests, how sometimes you're all drawn together in the same place at the right time. And I like your quote, Robin, about just being open to that possibility. Being here in St. Louis, the St. Louis area, and having the opportunity that I had when Sarah Brewski was here and she was our club president, having like-minded trainers like to train with. And then, going up to Columbus, Ohio, and then there's the Posse Dog crew and all like-minded there. It's just fascinating to me, knowing that, we're kind of in the beginning of this whole positive bite sport, thing that we're doing. And it's just cool to be open to that and realize it's just kind of the beginning of another thing that, it's just something to try. It's a fun experiment that we're all working through. I don't know. It's just fascinating how people come together like that. Let's listen to some more Jo-Rosie. What do you think?
And then sounds great.
So when I first started, I was conceived by these sort of force-free parents, if you like. And so it's how I learned, it's how I mastered my tools. So at the beginning, it was very simple. It's beautifully black and white. I wish I could go back to still thinking like that. And I would look at those tools and I'd think they're torture devices. Like, why would you use electric shock on an animal? I don't need to know anymore, is how I used to feel. I don't need to know any more than that. Like it's horrific. Like, you wouldn't use it on a child, why do you, no, all that kind of stuff. And then as I began to look at other people's training, I was like, oh shit, there's more to this. Damn it.
And I hate that.
Yeah. And I had a couple of real ethical dilemmas where, so to start with, it the most straightforward question for me came with a couple of really tricky sheep killing predation cases. And I had a couple of real bad sheep killers. In fact, I remember one of them really well. It was a German Shepherd that would come from the RSPCA, and this couple wanted to give it life on this beautiful farm that they lived in, had a bunch of sheep. The dog didn't have to do any work with the sheep. They just wanted it as a general purpose farm dog. But this dog decided it wanted to eat all the sheep. But it probably didn't decide to. It was biologically, it was a magnet, and the dog had to. Anyway, and I remember going in there and starting out with my kind of like force-free protocol of life management and how can we make the garden a much cooler place and engagement and getting the dog working with you, all this jazz, and just thinking and doing that in that first session and thinking, getting in the car and thinking, oh my God, like, who am I kidding? Who am I kidding? Like, this isn't going to work. Like, this isn't going to work. I've got to be honest with myself. I understand the biological and neurological changes that are going to occur in this dog when they see the sign stimulus of the sheep. And I know that they're going to go into predation, and there is nothing that I can give these owners really that is going to stop it, especially because this dog had killed like 12 sheep, 12 of their own sheep by now. Oh. And so I was in a situation where I thought, right, so what are my options, which is what you go to, isn't it? Anything like medication? No. Like euthanasia? Like, yeah, that's an option. Like taking the dog back to the rehoming centre, having killed 12 sheep, which is basically a death sentence. Or do I go to a local trainer who uses methods that I wouldn't use? And I remember that was kind of like, there was like 6 or 7 cases like that where I kind of went, fuck. Is it that I'm not skilled enough? Is that what it is? And then speaking to other people and going, can you come and have a look at this case? And 9 times out of 10, they would go, no, not touching that with a barge pole, sorry. And then I had 2 second pair of eyes, and I won't name them because otherwise, people will hate me for saying this. So I don't want to take them as well. But they came over and had a look at it and was like, yeah, I get you. Like, there's like, what are we going to do? Like, there's not hope, like no way. And this dog has the opportunity to live this incredible, wonderful life where he gets biological fulfillment and a wonderful time. But there are these methods that he's going to have to go. And so I thought, yeah, okay, I'm going to refer this on, or I'm not going to refer it on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down to the clients and I'm going to talk them through the options. And I'm going to say to them, luckily for me, I get to shirk all responsibility of this decision because this is your decision now. And therefore, all I'm doing is giving you the information and walking away and saying, ta-ta, but let me know. And so that's what I did. And I sat down and they, of the 5 that I can recall very clearly in my mind, 4 of them, one of them euthanized the dog. The 4 of them went with the e-collar trainer and had incredible success very, very quickly. And the dogs never chased sheep again. They lived a wonderful life. And it was those cases a little bit further down the line in my career that really made me question it and made me go, oh shit, like it's not. So that was the first thing where I went, okay, it's not as clear cut in terms of the ethics of it. Like when is, and around the same time, I was working with a Vizsla rescue, a particular Vizsla rescue in Europe that had some really hardcore cases. And one of the dogs that I'd worked with, one of them jumped out of a 4-story building and survived because there was a fire in the flat. And another one had been buried alive with her sister. Her sister had died. She had dragged herself out with 2 broken back legs and managed to crawl to a main road and survived and went to this really lovely couple. And I remember thinking in those cases, in those predation cases, like dogs do choose life. Like they really do choose life. There is this massive thing about dogs. One of the things that we love about them is they choose to live. So, they will choose that. And I thought like if I could give this question to the dog about having this shitty experience or having this life, they're going to choose life. Oh yeah. And so that really broke my ethical, like my nice clean boxes. Just that's the first thing that broke my nice clean boxes and made me go, oh right, there's that I think, like, don't hate me, but I think there is a place sometimes for these things, like, because having this, if it's done properly, and I say that now having seen quite a few dogs through that process, just through because I needed to know what was happening if I was going to play any part in that process. And it's not as bad, like it was never as bad as I thought it was going to be. There weren't dogs screaming and yelping and throwing themselves at the floor. There were dogs that would just shake their head and go, oh fuck, and run back to their owner. And I'm like, oh, that little response there that was less stressful than half the dogs that I see in the shelters has just saved this dog's whole life. Yeah. And so that definitely changed my mindset on that and put me in a tricky position when it came to labeling. And I remember talking then on Facebook about this ethical puzzle, because I've always been very open on social media and being absolutely torn apart, like being ripped from the inside out by people just laying into me and not feeling any empathy towards the decision, and just being like, I cannot believe that even you mentioning this ethical puzzle is as good as you putting a shock collar on your dog, and how horrific it was and stuff. And that really choking me up and me thinking like, what have I done? Have I like ruined my whole career here because I've been honest about this puzzle that I'm in? And where does that, who am I now? I remember thinking, like, who am I now? Because can I still call myself a force-free trainer if I have this ethical dilemma going on in my head and me being like completely identity torn, thinking like, and then when I first started out, force-free or positive training was one thing. It was not using tools on your dog, really. And you were still, non-reward markers. If you read the early books like Culture Clash and a lot of the early Jean Donaldson books like mine and stuff like that, you'll be shocked at how now, if you were to put those books out, they would be considered balanced training, because they're like, the majority of them are not force-free as we know it now. Because back then, force-free was don't fucking beat the shit out of your dog. Like, don't be a dick. That's basically what it was. It was to combat these people who were alpha rolling and pinning dogs to the floor and all this. Yeah. It wasn't don't say no to your dog. It wasn't don't take your dog by the collar and lead them off if they jump on the counter. But it's turned into this different thing now. As a result of that, I then, as you do, jumped down that rabbit hole and thought, right, I need to properly understand these tools. And so I went across some, I met Michael Ellis and watched a lot of their training and did some stuff with some different trainers like Forrest Mick and a lot of other trainers that don't train the way that I train, and begun to understand that as much as us saying, us believing that these tools are used in this very one-dimensional way to light a dog up when they get something wrong is the same as them believing that all we do is feed dogs a treat after we've clicked when they get something right. And that actually there are incredible nuances and there are incredible different elegant systems and very different systems, like systems of punishment compared to like NAPO-PO and all these different systems of using this stuff.
Okay, so let's pause this a little bit. And now we've been listening to Jo-Rosie, and it's very, very interesting. It's almost like there's, people kind of have an idea of how somebody else trains. It's kind of along the lines. I'm trying to think of the word. It's like a picture of what we think that the other person does, and then we make a judgment on that. The English language is kind of escaping me right now, but
don't worry, it's a podcast. Words aren't important.
Yeah, I know. Seriously. Sometimes it just doesn't feel that it's like all of a sudden it escapes me. But
there was a meme that I was going to bring up here, if that's okay. And it was going around, it was a while ago now, but it said the degree of force used by a trainer is inversely proportional to the trainer's level of competence. And it really, it got a rise out of me and a bunch of people.
Yeah.
I do not agree with that.
Yeah.
And some other kind of people in my camp, what do you want to call it, also were like, no, that's not right. And then we took a bunch of heat for that.
By saying that?
Yeah, just by saying that, no, I don't agree with that.
Wow.
It was surprising the amount of voices that happen on social media.
well, that's social media for you right there in a big bucket, right? It's like, let me take a small sliver of what you said and let me change it the way I want to change it in order to make you look bad. And that's what social media is in a basket.
So they were just trying to say that, if you're not a competent trainer, then you're using force. And I just can't stand by that. I can't agree with that because there are amazing trainers out there using all sorts of different methods and techniques and ways of training with different dogs that are just brilliant, like what Jo-Rosie's saying. And for me to make a blanket statement and agree that, if you're using any sort of force, that you're no longer a good trainer, ridiculous, absolutely asinine.
I find that blanket statements are usually correlated with how much information the person actually knows about a topic. And the less information they know, the more blankety the statement seems to be.
And it's not a fuzzy warm blanket.
No, well, it's
one of those old holy ones.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking about just dog training. I just mean
in general.
Just in general. When people make a blanket statement, it usually means that there's not a whole lot of stuff behind that blanket statement.
Here's another term, science-based.
That's another one that gets everybody going.
I really appreciated her of being an elegant trainer.
Yes.
Mhm.
And that is something I have seen elegant trainers on both sides of the spectrum
Yes.
Mhm.
Fact.
that know exactly how much pressure to bring or know exactly when the reinforcement is required to bring clarity to the dog about what behavior you are actually trying to get. And that for me shows a mastery of their art. And when I look for trainers and people that I want to learn from, that's what I look for.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't usually listen to or follow the loud trainers. It's just all the noise. There's so much noise out there.
Loudness is usually a replacement for something. Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The louder they get, woo, the further I run.
I would much rather be, a quiet, elegant trainer than being a loud, brash trainer.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to use a bad word, but one of my favorite things you say, I'm just doing my shit here in Iowa.
And that's right. I have found my stuff that works for me. I will go ahead and do my stuff that works for me. The important thing is I have also found things that I can teach to other people.
Yep.
And if I am able to express things in such a way that it allows me to teach other people how to do and replicate, at least in some form, what I'm doing, then that works. I'm not the right instructor for everybody. I get it. It's okay.
What?
I believe,
Oh,
I know, right?
Come on. Give yourself some credit.
And it's really interesting because we have this whole conversation in my coaching school.
Yeah.
About, oh my gosh, there's, swing a dead cat and you're going to hit another executive coach or you're going to hit another dog
Swing
trainer.
a dead cat.
That's awful.
Yeah. It's
What?
a farm thing.
That's
I'm
a
sure
farm
you can come up
thing?
with another visual.
I don't know.
You say that on the farm?
Okay.
You swing dead cats?
We don't swing dead cats.
I've never
But-
heard that one.
Okay. So that's your new one for today.
Yeah.
There's 101 ways to skin a cat. How's that?
What do you, poor cats? What do you have against cats?
No, poor
What
cats.
is it about cats?
Dead cats, swinging them, skinning them, like, dude.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, come back with me.
Sorry.
She's like,
And now I've almost lost my whole entire train of thought, right?
You're welcome.
she's like, control the chaos, control the chaos.
What other cat reference can you make now?
Herding cats, like herding cats. That's what she's doing right now. She's trying to herd.
Well,
them.
that's you guys. I'm trying to herd you guys into the appropriate direction
I forgot my meds.
of
I'm
having
sorry.
this whole conversation about how there are lots of ways to train a dog.
Yes.
There are all sorts of different methods. The science behind behavior technology doesn't change. How you choose to apply the quadrants and all of those things is up to you.
Oh, you said quadrants. Oh my.
I
Here we
did.
go. Oh,
We're not going to do quadrants. But my point is, if you go stand in the bread aisle, there are a bajillion types of bread. Hawaiian rolls are now made into bagels and bread and all sorts of things.
hashtag attacked.
You can find a trainer that fits within your comfort level. So I just encourage people to, if you're working with a trainer that doesn't necessarily fit your ethical space, start networking, find somebody who does.
Or even if it's not your ethical space, right? Even if it's just like, do you not really understand how the person even communicates?
That's a big one.
So I'm going to summarize. If you're looking for sweet rolls, you should probably look for CBK9. If you're looking for no,
Those are Hawaiian rolls.
Rolodex, right?
Yes.
Cross-reference bread to train.
It's better than cats.
Correct.
So maybe instead of the spectrum, we use the bread aisle. Let's just start referring to trainers as different kinds of bread. Who's wheat? Who's white? No.
Exactly. And who are Hawaiian roll bagels? which are currently in my fridge. And I think it's important for people to understand that we were working on something, and Crystal had a little gem that came and bit me in the ass later in the week, because she was telling one of our students that if I do something and you don't understand why I'm doing that particular thing or why I suggest that particular thing to you, please ask me why.
Yeah.
It might take me a little bit to figure out why I'm having you do that, but I should be able to explain it to you because I am an instructor and I am a trainer.
Yeah.
And I actually had one of the students who asked me that later in the week, and I had to look at her and go, give me a second. I have to walk through this.
Yeah.
So I can tell you why I told you to do that. And it was one of those fascinating things where I had never had a student ask me why. Told her to take 2 steps to the left instead of 2 steps to the right, or 2 steps backwards.
Right.
But once I figured it out, I could explain it to her.
Yeah. I get those situations all the time, and it's just like you train intuitively, right? It's kind of really what you're talking about, is that there's a huge intuitive aspect to your training, and trying it. And honestly, for me, when I had to sit down and really think about it, I learn. And that's actually the part that I love about instructing. Well, one of the parts that I love about instructing is that people make me really think. It's like, well, I have this kind of intuitive thought process, and then I have to to articulate it. And articulating it is part of the education for me.
And I think that there's always this stigma, those that can't do teach.
Yeah, it's not true.
And in my opinion, it's not true. Actually, a person who teaches well, can definitely do. Yeah. And so we need to keep that in mind too. And I think it's important to have some of that, as we're having this discussion between the collaborative and interviewing all of these fantastic people like Jo-Rosie, it really does highlight how much is in common across multiple different types of dog things.
Mm-hmm.
One reason I do think she fits so well is she is so authentic. And I feel like that's also how we try to be with our helping of others and helping each other. We're always trying to strive toward authenticity and just being vulnerable. And I think that's something that she shares a lot in her social media. Something else she mentioned that grabbed my attention was the idea that she recommended the person to make a choice as to who they wanted to go train with, that they needed to make the decision based on the information she gave. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
And I think if you've ever seen an animal, or a dog, I should say specifically, shift into predatory, this like predatory drift that happens, and really truly become a predator, it changes everything about how you see dogs.
It does.
And I think that's something that she's definitely witnessed. And the people that have never seen that, I think, are sometimes the louder ones that I don't want them to have to experience that. Yeah. But I think it would open their eyes to understand that this is not, a frou-frou fluff ball, that this truly is an animal capable of very heinous things if given the opportunity to make really poor choices and not be managed. And it's scary.
Yes. There absolutely it is. And watching on the farm, we have 150 cattle, and watching your labs as a pack take off after some baby cows significantly alters your perceptions on lots of things, including electronic collars. And it also now has modified how I actually take the dogs for a run.
Yeah.
You have to keep everybody safe. And that's where being fair.
Absolutely.
Safety is number one, and it's just keeping everybody safe. It's the other animals. It's everything. Yeah. And I think you're right about that. I think if we're only watching TikToks, right, of cute little fluffy animals sitting on the sofa or doing silly things like riding skateboards, it's not that that's super, you know what I mean?
Right.
I think you do lose the true understanding. I mean, these are dogs. They're dogs.
They're predators.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you have to be fair.
Yeah.
And I think in being fair, it's about knowing the individual, as some breeds are going to be more prone to that predatory action than others. And
Yeah.
like you said, labs, I have Malinois and Dutch Shepherd. They're going to switch there even faster in my experiences, because that's what we selectively bred them for.
It's genetics.
And being fair means not treating every learner or every animal the same. So that's also something that I think some people think fair means that everybody and everything gets treated the same way.
No.
And to me, that's the most unfair thing you could possibly do. Yeah. And I mean, I preach that in my high school class as well. I mean, I tell the kids, I will allow this person to do this, but I will not allow everyone to do that. That is what being fair is about. And that's a great lesson, I think, for everybody. And it's unfortunate that even in high school, those kids don't even know that lesson a lot of times.
Wow.
I do want to point out one more thing she said there. She started off force-free. And it's interesting because I also started off force-free. So that's the only way that I knew. And
Me
so
too.
then
Me too.
learning, you as well. And that's, so it's such a, it's not a common thing, I don't think. I think most people start off pretty balanced and using different tools. And then they kind of make decisions along the way as to, oh, well, this person's doing this and this one's doing this. And you have the whole crossover realm and all of that. But it was interesting. I always find it fascinating for people that start off one way and switch to another and then switch to another. I love hearing those stories. Robin, you made a face.
Yeah, and I don't put myself in any bucket. I just, it's just more, but my education did start off like totally, probably, like the whole purely positive on, everything was my initial education. So it is very interesting.
I started off as a punishment-based trainer because I didn't know any better. And I had a border collie who very nicely told me that he did not appreciate me very much. And so ended up going out and having to find different ways to train, because when you have a soft border collie, that's what you're required to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's just interesting how, even as a trainer who's been now in the dog training world for 22 years, I still go out and seek out new and different ways to learn and new ways to train dogs, because not every dog is the same learner as the learner that I had last time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a journey, right? And we're all on our own journey, and we all kind of start in one spot, and hopefully we honor the dog as we go, and we just try to become better and better. And I think it just really comes down to that versus trying to put everybody in a bucket.
Well, and as a force-free or whatever you want to call me, protection sport trainer, there's not a lot of us out there.
No.
So to think that, I'm only learning from other force-free people is just crazy. I am learning so much from trainers all over the world, that travel here and come to seminars. And I love training with such a variety of people. And I think sometimes I also do feel kind of a pressure when people do learn that I'm not using tools, and I'll see them go, oh, should I take the prong collar off? I'm like, are you kidding me? No, I don't have judgment on this. This is just something I don't know how to use. It's not a tool in my toolbox, but there's no pressure, no judgment. And I think that's something that I do kind of tiptoe around a little, that I feel like I should be more just straightforward with. So I think it's okay saying, this is my belief system and I can't wait to learn more from you. So I just wish people could be more open, I think.
Honestly, like if I just think about nose work, right, there's, years ago, that was kind of a really big hot topic. It's kind of like, are you, pairing, or are you not pairing, or are you, back chaining and all this stuff, these discussions, and they would get in these heated arguments on Facebook. And I have to tell you, I mean, like literally, I mean, I learn, granted, I use markers and I train a certain way, but I mean, I learn from a lot of people, and there's a whole lot of people that don't train the way I train that I've learned a ton from. And even though that doesn't get into whether it's punishment or not, because honestly, the way we're trained is it doesn't really come into it. It's just, I think it's important to think outside of what you currently your circle, and just kind of get information from outside of your circle. because otherwise we get into like, I actually wrote a blog recently. It was on cultural norms. And we get into like these cultural norms. And I think, it turns into, you hear someone say something and it turns into like a law. And then all of a sudden you can't break out of that and you can't do any kind of critical thinking. And I think that's a huge, that's a huge issue, that we really have to kind of break out of that and just kind of think outside of our circle. And by the way, we can put that in the show notes. We can put a link to that blog if anybody's interested.
Yes.
All right. I want to hear some more Jo-Rosie. What do you think?
That sounds good.
Yes.
Let's do it.
All right.
And then after that, I came back home and I was training one day and my dog didn't out. And my coach said to me, what do you use to punish him at home? Like, I know you guys don't really do that stuff, but what do you do when a dog doesn't come up? And I said, well, I have a mistake marker that I use, and I use it as part of a communication system where I say to him, where I'm telling him that something he's done is wrong. And it's not a non-reward marker, because I don't use it when there is an expectation of a reward and then take that reward away. It's just a mistake marker that I make when, and I believe that he understands that mark because of the tone and because of, for whatever other reason, he understands that me going, is him, he knows that that's wrong. And so he said, okay, well, when he doesn't out this time, I want you to use that noise and I want you to just walk away. And when he does come out, I want you to walk away. And that was against all of my kind of everything I believed in training. And I was like, I really don't want to do that. But I thought I'd just kind of come off this massive hamster wheel of not experimenting, but watching other people do it. And I thought, you know what, I've got to maybe give this a go. So I gave it a go and I did it. And my dog fell apart. Like he just turned into a little bit of scramble. All I did is go, and walk away. But because of the way I trained him historically and because of just who he was, he just turned into a scrambled egg mess. And then I sent him onto the bite again and outed him, and his out was even worse. And so I just looked at David and I was like, I'm not doing that. And I went back to the van after I'd called him off and given him a massive reward and just cried, right? Yeah. Which sounds so sensitive. And I know that loads of trainers who use tools and stuff like that are going to think like, what a proper sop. But my dog is a really sensitive dog, and he had a whole history of not being used these things. And so him falling apart and going into scrambled egg like that, what it taught me was, irrespective of how I feel about the way those trainers train and how elegant some of those systems are, and how in theory, although I've never seen it in practice, they can be used in a way that isn't aversive and isn't using aversives particularly, I could never push the button. That's what I realized. Like, I remember sitting down and going, I can't ever use that because I could never push that button on my dog. But I couldn't do that. And I've always kind of, when I think about dog fighting versus putting my dog in a ring and getting him to bite a man, the main difference, the reason that one to me is all right and one isn't all right, is that when I go and tell my dog to go and bite the man, I'm in 99.9% sure that my dog and the man are not going to be injured or die, right? They're not, right? Because I've put in every safety protocol. When you walk into a dog fighting match and you send your dog on to bite another dog, you are 99.9% sure the dog is going to be injured and get hurt, right?
Yeah.
And all of my training kind of has always fallen on the side of, well, I'm never going to hurt him and I'm never going to scare him and I'm never going to do anything. Like, my relationship with him is the foundation of everything I do. And I realized that day that I couldn't do anything to jeopardize that. And that's a me thing. That isn't really a ethics or a training methodology question. I don't judge the people who can do it, really, as long as they do it in a way that is elegant, effective, and very clear for the dog. And in fact, there are definitely scenarios in training where I think to myself, if I had trained him with an econ system, I could train this much more clearly without frustration in a way that is actually probably more ethical for my dog. But I can't do that. I can't do it. And so that's where I sit on the ethics.
Fascinating. That's a really cool. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I see much wine in my future and contemplation on this, right?
And I have the other issue where I think that I could get angry fast. And so that's why I can't do it. Yeah. I get frustrated, and then that frustration builds so fast. And I have such a great counterpart. Nancy is my training buddy, and she just sees the good in everything. And she's always rewarding the good and marking the good in me and other people and her dogs. And it's such a great balance that she doesn't let me start to get that frustration because I know I could go there. And so that's why I don't.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the most common thing. And that's definitely what I see in trainers. You know, I've tried never to be judgmental, and we've definitely had students that have used it for something. And what I see is that it's, you know, it's a little bit like meth, and that as soon as they've used it, they use it, and then it's used for everything. And I can see why. And part of that reason is because it is so effective. And I think my biggest problem with it is that I think out of all of the systems that I've seen, in theory, the NAPO system is the most elegant and is the most hypothetically the nicest, if you like, system. However, I've never ever seen that system used with any effect without the trainer then using the e-collar for corrections. And if they use it for corrections, it kind of negates the whole system, in which case it's no longer NAPO, in which case that theory falls apart in practice. Like I do understand it, and I've spent years now like researching it and training with trainers that train like that, and it's just, I think I get really frustrated going into your myth thing with the fact that there's so many balance trainers out there saying we can't do what we're already doing. That's what
right.
That's what annoys me most. I'm like, you're sitting there saying I can't do it. I'm over here training it. So like, oh, that's awkward. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it also plays into, you know, without you being able to title Blake, and I'm not able to title Checkmate. And I know we don't have anything to prove. We don't have to go out there and title our dogs, just like nobody else has to. But it does feel like it just hits a little deeper when we can't go out and show that these dogs are so great and so capable.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you're 100% right. 100% right.
And there's no flag to wave. I get it. You know, I don't have to wave any flags for anybody because I don't, I just, like you said, you can't push the button. And I know that I would push the button too much. So
it's a difficult one, isn't it? So I sit on two different sides, and I haven't really been able to reconcile my two thought processes on it. One of my thought processes is that I get very frustrated, particularly by the balanced community, who seem to, what they often do when they're giving examples of why and how positive training doesn't work is crowbar what we do, like the tools and the mechanisms that we use to train, into their system of training. And I find that very, very frustrating, because I'm like, yeah, but our whole system is different. So you can't,
foundations, everything.
Yeah, you can't say, well, if I was training positively, I'd be no. If you're training positively, you wouldn't be training this like this here now, or like in any way, because that's just not. It's a completely different system. Like it's a totally different beast. So I get very frustrated about that, and I get very frustrated about all the people that say you can't do it. I get very frustrated about being put in the same camp as a lot of the trainers that are terrible trainers that are just ineffective and use positive training really as an excuse to never really bloody train their dog and to not do a lot. And I find that highly frustrating. And it becomes so much more semantic and so much more theoretical. And you're like, just show me your dog and what you mean, because I'm pretty sure you're not going to be able to show me a dog and what you mean, because by the way you're talking so in theory. And those are the people that seem to shout loudest against the balanced community, which then just ignites this weird perception of like positive only, like this term that seems to have come out of the balanced community to describe our training, when actually none of us had ever called ourselves positive only, because we're not fools. So I get very frustrated at that. But then on the other side of that, there's a much more sort of a much more clean and much more nicer idea about society, which is that, like, really, why have we even got any of these labels? Because it's just a waste of time. It's just a waste of time. They're just a waste of time. Like, they're just a total waste of time. Because I can honestly say, hand on heart, the difference between me and another positive no tool trainer is greater than the difference between me and a balance trainer. So what camp does that mean I sit in? Like there is a balance trainer out there that trains just like me, but occasionally does something and calls themselves balance. And then there are a whole bunch of positive trainers out there that train nothing like me at all. Right. And so it all just becomes this meaningless thing. And so when you think about it, it's just a continuum. It's just like this long continuum of like, you've got your really, really, really extremist. I don't ever put my dog on a lead. My dog has to be a dog, blah, 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 over here. And then you've got your really, really extremist. My dog is never off the lead. He wears a muzzle, and I take him into any situation and tell him what he can't do all the time, right? Over here. And then you've got like every single gradient of color in the middle, like every single gradient of color in the middle. And there is no, like, you could put in there. So like your color thing, I was thinking about this because the difficulty with it, because I was looking at it and I was going, where the fuck do I fit in there? Like, I don't know. Like, that's not even the color I am. So I don't, but the problem is, if I could put in there these little like markers where I say, well, at this point, these trainers are trainers that use tools, and these trainers are trainers that don't use tools. Or these trainers, from here on out, you can't go further than this if you don't use a prong collar, and you can. But the trouble is, there'll be trainers that train with this ethos that don't use a prong collar, and there'll be trainers that train with this ethos that do use a prong collar. And so it's impossible.
And that's where I really want to collaborate on that, because I think there is something to be said or used with the continuum idea. We'll share this stuff too on our Facebook. So if you're like, what are you guys talking about? Check out our Facebook and Instagram. So,
or the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, now you're going to talk synesthesia. Oh boy. But yeah, so take a look at show notes too. But just the idea of trying to talk about it as a continuum instead of black and white, because the world is not black and white. And so if we start thinking about our different dogs, they are also kind of on this continuum of what they need, and I'm on a continuum of what I need, and not even just it's changing every day. So, did I take my ADHD meds today? That sort of thing really impacts how I feel and think. And I think about when my dog's needs are met and when they're not met, and the difference, and what kind of encouragement my dog is going to need when he's stupid high because he hasn't run, and So I think there's something there, but it needs a lot of tweaking and a lot of work and a lot of explanation to go along with it. But I think I was trying to figure out why, because something you said earlier about chemistry was, should you even talk about the dopamine, but you do that for the chemists? And I feel like for dog trainers, but also for the person looking for someone to help them with their pet, if there was some way that we could communicate how we see or go about how we approach our training, I do think that's something that'd be nice to have a common language on. I just don't like the words that I use necessarily. Like, it needs a lot of work.
The difficulty with it, though, when it comes to owners as well, is that if I hark back to those dogs, those predation cases, right? If I was to ask those owners if they wanted to go with a trainer that uses prong collars and e-collars and a trainer that doesn't, they're going to say that they want to go with the trainer that doesn't, because especially in the frame in which that this is now placed in the media. So the shame they're going to feel when that trainer says to them, Orcs, I think you're going to need one of these trainers.
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not that's right either. And
I'd like to take the shame away somehow. And that's what I'm kind of hoping towards. Because when you said you feel like there's a point where there's tools and there's no tools, that's something that I've been thinking about since last night. And I want to try to make sure that that line is not a line, that I want the colors to all blend, and not be those single blocks, and that there is that fluctuation of where things can happen.
Absolutely. But then the other problem is that when you put different dogs into that, different dogs find different things more or less averse. So hope.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I like it, because we can talk about it for dogs and for people.
Yeah. And my little bulldog, wherever she is the most robust, sassy little bugger that you can imagine. Like I don't think she's the kind of dog that if you were to put a collar on her, she'd just blow it off. I think she's a dog that really suits my style of training, because she doesn't give a shit about anything else, and she'd be a pain in the ass to train in the other way. Like, you have to motivate her, because she's and Archie was the same, in that my old pit bull, there wouldn't be a punishment that punished his behavior enough unless you blew his head off, because he didn't give a toss. Like, he just didn't. He was just so thick-skinned, and he just didn't. And when you put that into an ethical paradigm, you think, well, I just have to choose what's the ethical thing in that situation is to choose what is the clearest for my dog, right?
Yes.
Like clarity
Yes.
has to live on that ethical
Right.
thing. Like clarity has to be a pillar there. And so the clearest thing for my dog is what I would have to choose. But then if I was to choose that for that dog, that's not something that I would ever choose for like my Hungarian Vizsla, who's like a little sensitive little princess. And then as a good trainer, like as a decent trainer who reads dogs well and stuff, it makes me go, well, you know, I can do that. I'm of a privileged perspective that I can look at those two dogs and very clearly go, well, I can see that dog needs that, and that for that dog, there's no ethical dilemma there. I'd never be able to physically punish Archie because he would enjoy it too much. Like he'd bloody love it.
Right.
And so I have to use motivation with him. It's kind of all I've got. But hypothetically, if there was a situation where with clarity, I don't know, I gave him a timeout and locked him in a room or whatever, and like if that was the most clear thing in that situation, because he doesn't give a shit about anything like that, that would probably be the most ethical choice, despite there being a hell of a lot less aversive, less intrusive methods. That one would provide the most clarity. That one would be the most effective. And for that dog, that's fine, because a little bit more aversive or a little bit less aversive is still not over that threshold of fear and anxiety and pain and all of that kind of stuff.
Let's pause here. And we've been listening to a whole lot of stuff, and I think we probably need to sit around with a nice glass of wine. And Robin, you've got a really great wine that maybe we can put a link of that in the show notes.
Will do.
That was pretty awesome. And I mean,
we should have linked that in the first episode.
Exactly. So, I mean, we've been listening to like 2 hours or we've been involved in 2 hours of interview with Jo-Rosie. It's been absolutely fascinating and really incredible over the last 4 episodes. And what are our final thoughts here?
I will say something she just mentioned in this last bit, and it kind of bounces off of something I said before, is really good training is elegant, effective, and clear. And those are, I think, new tenets for me to start looking at when I start setting up trainings for students and for myself and for my dogs, is especially the effective and clear, and my timing and observation skills had better hopefully make it elegant.
I'm going to say my takeaway is I love dogs, and I love to train with people that also love dogs. And I don't care how you train, because truly the relationship is that foundation, and it shows through in how you train and how you interact with your animal and your learner. And I like the part where she said to ask yourself why. And so why am I training this way? Why am I training this thing? And that's the one that I'm going to also stick with. Stacey, how about you?
Honestly, that training is complicated. And, you know, just listening to Jo-Rosie over 4 episodes, and it's just, I think there is real value in just thinking about your training and not necessarily just training because you were told to train a certain way or something like that, and to just do some reflection. I think these last 4 episodes, there's been a whole lot of reflection, and for me, that is hugely powerful. And I think we need to challenge ourselves to do more and more of that. So I think we're going to wrap up this episode. Check us out on K9DetectionCollaborative.com. That's K, the number 9, DetectionCollaborative.com. You can also check out our socials. We'll see you next time. Thanks again, guys. Hey guys, it's Stacey Barnett from K9 Detection Collaborative, and we wanted to just tell you that we have something really special coming up. Did you know that September 28th is National Ask a Stupid Question Day? Well, no question is stupid, and if you would like to get your questions answered, make sure that you go to our Facebook or Instagram link and send us a message with your question due by September 21st, and we will make sure that on our next podcast coming out just before National Ask a Stupid Question Day, we will get your questions answered.
Canine Detection Collaborative. We
We appreciate the time you spend with us. If you liked this episode, not only should you follow us so you don't miss the next one, but please also rate and review us in your favorite podcast app. For info on collaborating with us, go to k9detectioncollaborative.com. That's K9detectioncollaborative.com, where you can find our socials and pick up our latest monthly freebie. Join us again to talk training in the next episode.